And good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, April 8th, 2026, and a lot has happened within the last 48 to 24 hours. And mainly, I want to talk about the unhinged lunatic that's currently holding the nuclear codes. And of course, I mean Donald Trump. And he's basically attempting to start World War III without even either realizing or even giving a rat's ass about it. Because thankfully there's a ceasefire now, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But he basically threatened openly genocide, which is war crimes and in violation of at least several international laws, where he was saying, I will wipe the civilization off the face of the earth by destroying your power plants and your infrastructure. And then the Iranian people came together in unity and made a circle and surrounded the power plants and some infrastructure to prevent that from happening, where Donald Trump decided to say that what the Iranian people were doing to come in unity was illegal. And I go back and say it again that this is what narcissists do. This is what madmen and dictators do. But mostly this is what narcissists do. They project. They're saying, you can't do it because it's illegal, but I can do it because I am the president and I can do whatever I damn well please. Just like he did with mail in voting, where he said, I can do it because I'm the president, but I'm going to sign an executive order because that you can't do it because it's fraud, and I'm going to direct the post office to follow my order. Okay. Okay. And that's all well and done. But here's the thing. There is a ceasefire, yes. And it's Taco Man strikes again. Trump always chickens out. You know, I was actually curious to see if the 8 o'clock deadline would pass and if Trump would actually go with his genocidal threat of dropping bombs on power plants and things like that. I would have been really, really curious to see if he actually would have gone through with it. Because I'm not so sure he's dumb enough to do that. You know? Even he has limits. So I was curious about that. The thing is, with the ceasefire, who does it benefit? Does it benefit Trump or does it benefit Iran? Because the way I see it, Iran has the upper hand here. Iran has more, believe it or not, Iran is more powerful these days than the United States. And they have weapons. And Trump thinks by annihilating Iran, that'll be the end of them. But Irans are all over the world. I have friends that are Iran or Persian or whatever you want to call them because, you know, and they are here in the United States, all over, probably in each state, and you don't think they can do damage here? Um, but nevertheless, if Joe Biden had said, and I'm going to keep using Joe Biden as the example because since MAGA likes to bring it up, if Joe Biden said something like this, you can bet your bottom dollar Republicans would be up in arms and they would immediately be drawing articles of impeachment. But when Donald Trump said it yesterday, where were the Republicans? They kept quiet. They didn't condemn him. They didn't say a word. Who condemned him? Democrats, Marjorie Taylor Greene, other world leaders. And where were the Republicans? And now they're waking up. And now they're saying they want congressional approval. They want congressional approval? Are you fucking kidding me? They have the approval the entire time. The Republicans were the ones who rejected the war resolutions when the Democrats brought it forth to the House and the Senate. The Republicans said, no, we're not going to agree to any war resolutions. And now they're demanding we want congressional approval. Oh, fuck you, Republicans! You always had congressional approval. This is on you because you're the one who's supposed to give the approval to war, not a president, as stated in the Constitution. And now you're claiming you want congressional approval. It's a little bit too late for that, don't you think? You are the ones who enabled this motherfucker, unhinged madman. You're the one who enabled him because everything he did, it was like, eh, eh. But if Joe Biden did it, he'd be up in arms. And if Nancy Pelosi was still Speaker of the House, articles of impeachment would have already been brought to the floor with Donald Trump's stupid comments. Okay, Nancy Pelosi would have already written up articles of impeachment. But you really have to understand the whole picture here. Donald Trump said, "Open the Strait of Hormuz, or you got nothing." But Donald Trump doesn't understand that they closed it because of him. They closed it because of him. They did. And now it's opened again as part of the ceasefire deal. And the funny part about that is that now that the Strait of Hormuz is opened up again, the price of oil went down, and the stock market is working the way it's supposed to be right now. Imagine that. Imagine that. Who's profiting off of it? You guessed it, of course. Of course, you get it. And now Hesketh is spreading a lie, who's claiming Iran begged for a ceasefire after the U.S. and China agreed to trade pause, and that's a lie. He's basically doing another gaslighting of projection. Hesketh, Iran was not begging for anything. Iran could give two shits of a lamb steak about Donald Trump. Iran is more powerful than we are in this case. They rejected the ceasefire because the United States is making demands that Iran has no reason to accept. Donald Trump started this war, and now he's making the demand saying, "Give us what we want, and we'll stop attacking you." Well, no, that's not how this works. That's not how this works. So Heather's now saying Iran is begging. How stupid does he think people are, Pete Hesketh? Iran has begged us? No, Iran doesn't beg. If Iran wanted to destroy us, they easily could. And by the way, they hacked into our cyber security systems, and they can easily hack us. They can easily turn off all our electricity in a second. Those planes flying in the air, they would crash. Driving in the street, the lights in the street at night, we'd have a complete blackout. Driving on the roads, yeah, it would be shut down. Believe me, if Iran want to incapacitate the United States, they have the means to do it. And not only that, not only that, Russia's helping them, and Russia is could hack also because they influenced or they tried to influence the election, as Robert Mueller stated they did. And Donald Trump knew that because he said during the debate with Hillary Clinton, "Russia, if you're listening," which basically means he was telling Russia, "Do whatever you need to do." So Donald Trump knows that what Russia is doing, and Donald Trump doesn't even care. Donald Trump knows that Russia is helping Iran. Donald Trump knows that Russia is giving our intelligence to Iran, and Donald Trump knows that Russia is helping Iran with the war. And that's why Donald Trump released the sanctions from Russia. And Donald Trump doesn't care. Why? Because this is benefiting him. And as I said, narcissists don't do anything unless it benefits them. The ceasefire benefits Donald Trump because he's getting exactly what he wants. The oil goes down, the stock market returns to normal, America is happy, and he profits. Because now he mentioned today about Iran's uranium. And I don't know why the United States would need uranium since it's radioactive, but Donald Trump mentioned today that we can now have Iran's uranium. And we don't know what to do. Outside of the Strait of Hormuz opening, we have no idea what the ceasefire entails. We have no idea if we can even trust Donald Trump uphold the ceasefire. I trust Iran. I don't trust our government. And that's sad that we can't do that. And I never thought I'd be agreeing with Iran. But imagine for a second if Hakoman, who has the nuclear codes, released a nuclear bomb onto Iran at the deadline last night, Tuesday, April 7th. Imagine for a second if he did that. That would lead to world war, that would lead to genocide, massive war crimes, and most likely World War III. And it would lead to a global catastrophe that would go unchecked for years. Do you think Donald Trump would take responsibility for it? Probably not, because he hasn't taken responsibility for anything else. Do you think Donald Trump would care that he just, murdered thousands of people in Iran? No, he wouldn't. He would just brag about it and say, I did what nobody else was willing to do, destroy Iran. Well, yeah, nobody's going to do that because A, there's genocide, which is in violation of constitutional law and international laws. Two, presidents aren't murderers. And three, that's not how you resolve issues. That's what we have diplomacy for. That's how we have diplomacy. And you want to brag about it, then you're just proving that, then you're just admitting that you're guilty of what you've done. Because a confession is an admission. Bragging is an admission. If I kill 5 people and I say, oh yeah, I killed them, but I'm never going to tell you where the bodies are. Well, that's a confession. I just admitted, without realizing it, I just admitted that I murdered 5 people. Yeah, and the more lies you tell, at some point you lie so much that at some point you're going to throw the truth in there without realizing it. And Peter Skid goes, and for whatever reason, he says, he pointed to a divine providence while telling protesters that Iran's weapons factories had been reduced to rubble, which may or may not be true. Its military rendered it ineffective for years. Again, probably not true. And its supreme leader left wounded and disfigured, all for a temporary ceasefire. Again, none of this, I doubt, is any truth to it. I have no doubt in my mind this is probably made up bullshit that Peterson is trying to sound tough and saying, yeah, we did the unthinkable and that's a ceasefire. Well, first of all, if that's true, then there would be no ceasefire. Because Iran will not agree to a ceasefire when you just destroyed their military, their weapons factories, and then injuring the supreme leader. I don't think you would agree to a ceasefire with that. Plus the fact, do they even know where he's hiding? How can they know he's disfigured? There's absolutely no way to know that he's injured or disfigured, especially if he's in hiding. So I'm pretty sure I don't believe that to be true. He's just saying it to sound like a tough guy, to sound proud of himself. Because I can tell you this much: if I was the Iranian military, if I was the Iranian leadership, or any leadership for that matter, I wouldn't agree to a ceasefire under those conditions. Again, we don't know what the ceasefire entails. They haven't released the information. At any rate, during a press briefing, Hesketh said Iran begged for the ceasefire, and we all know it. Gaslighting, not happening. Iran did not beg for a ceasefire. They did not ask for it because twice before they rejected the demands. So how is on the third time they suddenly want the ceasefire? How is on the third try they're like, sure, we'll do it, after rejecting the demands the first 2 times? So this is a lie. We're being lied to. Operation Epic Fury, he said, decimated Iran's military and rendered it combat ineffective for years to come. Another bullshit lie. Iran's military is strong. They didn't decimate it. Trust me. And if that's the case, they're still not going to do a ceasefire. Okay? Japan in World War II surrendered. Their military was intact. Germany surrendered in World War II. Their military was intact. Austria surrendered in World War One. Their military was intact. So I'm pretty sure, if I know my history, and if history proved anything, it's that countries wouldn't have their military decimated because no country could survive without a military, and that's a fact. And and there's no way for anybody to verify this information. This information can be easily verified. But this administration doesn't believe in facts. The only facts they believe in is the ones they make up. And that's a fact. We've seen it before with the Minneapolis shootings. We've seen it before, you know, with Kristi Noam. So this is an administration that has a tendency of making up their own stories and telling people that that's actually what happened. And that if you believe the actual story that's not coming from the administration, then it's not true. It's a lie, and you shouldn't believe it. They want they want to tell the narrative, and that's what narcissists do. That's what narcissists do. They tell you a narrative, and if you believe anybody else, then they're lying to you because their narrative is the one they are going to tell, and that's the narrative they're going to keep repeating. And at some point, when they tell that narrative, they are going to change the story when they get called out. And that's why when Donald Trump was asked on Air Force One about the Iran war, a specific question, he went ahead and started bragging about his ballroom that's being built. You know, nobody asked about it. Nobody cares about it. The question that was asked about was in the Iran war, but Donald Trump didn't want to talk about it because, he got called out, so he went and switched to the ballroom. And that's what narcissists do. When they are called out and don't want to be held accountable or don't want to admit to the truth, they will automatically switch stories. They will automatically switch gears to an unrelated topic, to something else entirely, because they want to brag and they want to say, see, we're building the greatest ballroom ever that the American people want. No, the American people don't want a ballroom. The White House already had a ballroom. The fact that you didn't like it, who cares? And anyway, Trump's self-imposed deadline had completely destroyed Iran's defense industrial base. Iran could still fire what it had stockpiled. He acknowledged they can still shoot, but it can no longer manufacture the weapons to replace them. And as usual, Trump had to post it on Tuesday night that he agreed to suspend military operations less than 2 hours before his own apocalyptic deadline to decimate the entirety of Iranian civilization after a last-minute intervention by Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief General Asim Munir. And here, this is Donald Trump's post. It's a doozy. Based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and whereon they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with the definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. Well, what are these objectives? We don't know what those objectives are. What were military objectives? We still don't know. And a long-term peace deal with Iran, we already had that peace deal. Remember, John Kerry was involved in that peace deal. During Obama's presidency, John Kerry made the peace deal. Iran agreed to it. They signed it. Obama signed off on it as well. Iran was complying with that deal. Trump took that deal, ripped it up, and asked for a new and wants a new deal. Why? Simply because he can take credit for it. Why? Because that's what narcissists do. Everything that happens, they need to be credited for because it's an ego thing. They are insecure people. That is why. So he's basically gaslighting America by saying, we are hoping for an everlasting deal with Iran. We already had the deal. We already had the deal. Trump ripped it up. John Kerry did the deal. Here, this is it. John Kerry's peace deal is a Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, which also known as the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which was finalized on July 14th, 2015. The agreement involved the P5 plus one, which was US, UK, France, China, Russia, and Germany, plus Germany, lifting significant economic sanctions in exchange for Iran, limiting its nuclear program, and allowing strict international monitoring. This came from the US Department of State. This was done. John Kerry was the Secretary of State under Obama. You remember? And he made the nuclear agreement with Iran. This is listed on the U.S. Department. This is on the State Department's website. Anybody can look at it. It's also on YouTube. It's also on Wikipedia. So the reference is there. These were the parts of the deal. Nuclear limitations. Iran agreed to cut its uranium stockpile by 98% for 15 years, reduce its centrifuges by 2/3 for 10, and eliminated its heavy water reactor core at Arak. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, was granted enhanced access, including 24/7 monitoring of key facilities and inspections of declared and undeclared sites for verification. The deal was signed to increase Iran's breakout time, which is time needed to produce enough fissile material for a bomb, from a few months to at least 1 year. In return, international sanctions related to Iran's nuclear activities were lifted, allowing the country to rejoin the global economy. The implementation of the JCPOA was adopted on October 18th, 2015, and began implementation in January 2016 through the U.S. withdrawal from the agreement in 2018. The agreement, hailed by supporters as a way to prevent an Iranian nuclear bomb without war, was often criticized for having sunset clauses, which means expiration dates on restrictions and not addressing Iran's ballistic missile program or regional influence. So there was a deal. And here it is. And I'm going to read this directly from the State Department. This is archive contact. But if you want to look for it, it's on the U.S. Department's Diplomacy in Action, U.S. Department of State. It's coming here. It is from Secretary Kerry on September 2nd, 2015. He says, without this agreement, Iran could double the number of its operating centrifuges almost overnight and continue expanding with ever more efficient designs. With this agreement, Iran's centrifuges will be reduced by 2/3 for 10 years. In fact, I'm going to play you the YouTube video that President Obama delivered to announce a historic nuclear agreement that will verifiably prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. This is the entire announcement that Obama issued to America, to the nation and the world on July 14th, 2015.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. This deal demonstrates that American diplomacy can bring about real and meaningful change. Change that makes our country and the world safer and more secure. This deal is also in line with a tradition of American leadership. It's now more than 50 years since President Kennedy stood before the American people and said, "Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate." He was speaking then about the need for discussions between the United States and the Soviet Union, which led to efforts to restrict the spread of nuclear weapons. In those days, the risk was a catastrophic nuclear war between two superpowers. In our time, the risk is that nuclear weapons will spread to more and more countries, particularly in the Middle East, the most volatile region in our world. Today, because America negotiated from a position of strength and principle, we have stopped the spread of nuclear weapons in this region. Because of this deal, the international community will be able to verify that the Islamic Republic of Iran will not develop a nuclear weapon. This deal meets every single one of the bottom lines that we established when we achieved a framework earlier this spring. Every pathway to a nuclear weapon is cut off, and the inspection and transparency regime necessary to verify that objective will be put in place. Because of this deal, Iran will not produce the highly enriched uranium and weapons-grade plutonium that form the raw materials necessary for a nuclear bomb.
I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's at least 14 minutes long. But you get the gist of it. So we already had this deal. Iranians were complying with it, and part of the deal was that they go there and verify, as I said. And there's a lot. And what you have to do is I will actually post, post these links, but there's a lot here. In fact, in the Geneva Convention, Secretary of State John Kerry made remarks on the nuclear deal at the Geneva Convention. Now, I'm not going to read. I'm not going to read all of it, but basically, what he's basically saying. He made an entire announcement at the Geneva Convention outlining the Iranian deal and the countries that all agreed to it. And yes, even Russia agreed to it. Yes, Russia agreed to this. Um, you can also get references from CNN, Harvard Gazette, and everything. So we already had a deal in place. And as the President of the United States, Donald Trump should have known that. As Secretary of State, Marco Rubio should know that because it would be in the archives room. And the proof was in the pudding that Iran was complying with the deal and they weren't building a nuclear weapon. However, again, North Korea has a nuclear weapon and they've actually openly tested it. So why are we attacking Iran? There was no imminent threat. MAGA will have you believe that there was. Republicans will have you believe there was. But it's been confirmed that there wasn't. And as I just proved, and as I just proved, Donald Trump took this deal. This deal was made in good faith by not just us, but the European Union signed off on it too. And when you don't honor your deals, you're not trustworthy. So why would these countries, why would the EU trust us when we broke a deal? Why would Iran trust us when we broke a deal? What Donald Trump is not telling you is that he wants a deal. But what he's not telling you is that the deal existed and he whipped it up simply because he wants credit for it and he wants profit off of it. That's like breaking a contract. When you sign a contract, that's a legally binding contract. And if you're in breach of a contract, yes, you can get sued. And people have. That's why you want out of a contract. If something's not right, you can amend the contract, you can revise the contract, or you can buy out a contract, or ask to be taken out of your contract. But just to breach the contract, yes, you can get sued. But Iran also declared victory. That's what Peter Schiff won't tell you. He won't tell you the rest of it. Iran also declared victory. Its Security Council announced that nearly all the objectives of the war have been achieved. Again, we don't know what their objective was either. But Donald Trump won't even tell you that he was losing the war. He wants you to believe that he won. He wants to tell you that he won. But I'm not so sure he's going to honor the ceasefire either. The ceasefire temporarily ends over 5 weeks of war that began on 28th of February when the U.S. and Israel launched nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours against the Iranian military infrastructure, missile systems, and leadership. The Ayatollah Khomeini was killed on the first day, and his son was designated his successor on March 8th. Hesketh insisted that if Iran did not comply, if Tehran had not accepted the deal, he keeps saying that bridges and energy infrastructure, targets they could not defend, they could not realistically rebuild, it wouldn't have taken them decades. First of all, anything can be rebuilt. You can rebuild power plants. You can rebuild bridges. We've done it here in America. We've rebuilt bridges. Remember the Francis Scott Key Bridge that was damaged? Yeah, we fixed it. Everything can be repaired. Everything can be rebuilt. So Hesketh doesn't know what he's talking about. And Hesketh, who claims he was in the army and the military, should know this. Should know this from his time in the military, that anything can be rebuilt. And will it take decades? Depends on how fast you build it. Depends on where the money comes from. And believe me, Iran has money. That's the least of their concerns. In the time of the ceasefire, 13 U.S. service members were killed. Total deaths across the region said more than 5,000, including over 1,600 Iranian civilians and at least 1,497 people in Lebanon. The U.S. military had spent roughly $12.7 billion by day 6, with a $200 billion supplemental request pending before Congress. And here's where Trump, and here's where the ceasefire benefits Trump, which is why he accepted the deal. Trump posted Wednesday morning, that's today, that Iran would hand over its enriched uranium and there will be no enrichment going forward. Iran's 10-point counterproposal, published by its own Supreme National Security Council, explicitly demands the right to enrich. Okay? So it's a contradictory ceasefire. It's a he said, she said. And here's what it is. Here's Iran's 10 points. Hold on, I got to sign in. Hang on. Here it is. Number 10. Ceasefire on all fronts, including Israel's conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Get to that in a second. Withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region, which may or may not happen. We don't know. Compensation payment to Iran for war damage. We don't know if the Trump administration is even going to bother with that. We don't even know if they'll pay it back. End of all international atomic energy end of all International Atomic Energy Agency resolutions on Iran's nuclear program. Number 6, end of all United Security Council resolutions targeting Iran. 5, removal of all secondary sanctions against foreign entities that do business with Iranian institutions. 4, removal of all primary sanctions on Iran. 3, acceptance that Iran can enrich uranium for its nuclear program. 2, continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. And number 1, the U.S. must fundamentally commit to guaranteeing non-aggression. This is what Iran's 10-point is. And it's already been disputed because Israel says the ceasefire doesn't include Lebanon and, in fact, attacked Lebanon last night. And keep in mind, they've been in conflict with each other since October 7th, 2023, since that tragic day. So that's an entirely separate thing. But Netanyahu was quick to tweet out that the ceasefire does not include Lebanon, and thus we will continue attacking Lebanon. Donald Trump is basically saying, you have agreed to give us uranium, and Iran says, no, we don't. We want the uranium. We are taking our uranium. They want acceptance that Iran can enrich uranium for its nuclear program. Which, by the way, just because they want to enrich the uranium doesn't mean they're going to build a nuclear bomb. Okay? It takes years to build a nuclear bomb. Okay? Look at Oppenheimer. Well, okay, that was the atomic bomb, but it still takes years to build one. And FYI, the United States has a nuclear bomb just the same. And if we can have a nuclear bomb, If North Korea can have a nuclear bomb, if Russia can have a nuclear bomb, if Israel could have a nuclear bomb, why can't Iran? We have nuclear codes. In fact, the nuclear codes are switched out every 4 years, if and when there's a new president. But regardless of that, nuclear codes are always changed for security purposes. And only one man has those codes. Actually, two men have those codes. So why can't Iran have a nuclear bomb if we ourselves have a nuclear bomb? And just because you have that bomb doesn't mean they're going to use it. Doesn't mean they're going to use it. And Israel wasn't happy about the ceasefire deal either. So there was no communication anywhere. They were told about it late at night. Granted, there's a time difference there, but even so. Israel said it had halted attacks on Iran, but was continuing military operations in Lebanon against Hezbollah, prompting protests from Iran. Okay. Now, can Israel make its own ceasefire agreement with Iran? Sure they can. Of course they can. Will they? No. Israel, which wasn't formally part of the Iran negotiations, expressed unhappiness after learning that a deal was finalized at a late stage without its consultation. General Dean Cain warned on Wednesday that the Pentagon is prepared to resume its military campaign against Iran if the ceasefire collapses and talks fail. Iran signaled its intention to continue asserting influence over Hormuz, just like they always have, and some of the ships reported receiving radio messages from Iranian forces saying they need Iran's permission to cross the strait. Oil prices plunged on expectations, and by the way, this is all coming from the Wall Street Journal if you want to verify it. Oil prices plunged on expectations that tankers would be able to transmit through the Strait of Hormuz. Some Trump-aligned hawks, including Senators Lindsey Graham, criticized parts of the Iran ceasefire. Of course he would, because he's Lindsey Graham. Iran's Supreme National Security Council said its fingers are on the trigger ahead of negotiations set to start Friday in Islamabad. And Gulf countries, including Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE, reported continued missile and drone attacks despite the ceasefire. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here. In fact, let's go back to the Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, who is a staunch supporter of Trump, said he's not pleased with some of what's in the deal. And Mark Levine basically is unhappy with the entire deal. And yes, I will admit that not everybody's going to agree. Not everyone's going to like what's in the ceasefire. Not everyone's going to like what's in the deal. But it's a start. But the whole point of this war was for what exactly? Who won? Who wins? At the end of the day, who is the winner here? But more importantly, Iran knows about the deal that was made by Secretary of State John Kerry back in the day. And Iran was honoring that deal. That deal was done by Germany, Russia, United Kingdom, France. So they all know about this deal. And they had no reason to acquiesce to Trump to say, we are going to help you in this war. Because they didn't start the war. It doesn't benefit them, and they had a peace deal that was agreed upon. And they're also a lot closer to the Middle East than we are. And like Vietnam, that wasn't our war, and we lost that war. We went into Vietnam and we fought, but we lost that war, and we had no business being in that war. And if history taught us anything, it's that don't involve yourself in a conflict that has nothing to do with you. But we see that what this was all about. Trump got the Hormuz Strait open. Did he? He wants control of Hormuz. He wants to control with Iran. But it's not ours. It was never ours. It's the Strait is in Iran. Therefore, Iran has a right to control their property. Right? They have a right to control. Why would the United States need to control the Strait of Hormuz? It's very simple, because if Trump could profit off of that, and I'm going to ask a question: what happened to the Trump's phone that Donald Jr. and Arak announced way early on in the presidency? Like a few days into the presidency, they announced the Trump phone would be gold by every single character. Now, I've been to every AT&T store. I've been to a couple of AT&T stores in the last couple of weeks. Not one person there knew anything about the phone. I went to T-Mobile. Nobody knew anything about the phone. But yet, people put $100 deposits down on this phone. So, who exactly got the money from those deposits? Trump or the carriers? So, who? So why? So Trump again has a history of grifting. Trump has a history of not paying his workers over the years in the real estate business. There's a reason why Trump doesn't want his tax forms released. There's a reason why he doesn't want people to know. There's a reason why he tried to sue the New York Times when they got a hold of some of his tax papers. Trump doesn't want you to know he's not the richest person in the world. Trump doesn't want you to know how he conducts his business, because Trump knows his business. He runs an illegal operation. Trump sold us out with classified documents that don't belong to him, and he profited off of that. And that's got to tell you something. And Trump is saying Iran is giving him uranium. But why does Trump need uranium? Why do we need uranium? Why does the United States need any bit of uranium? If we have a nuclear bomb, and to be clear, I have no idea where the nuclear bomb is hidden, nor do I need to know where it's hidden. I just know we have one. Because otherwise, why else would you need nuclear codes, right? So, why does the United States need uranium? Anyway, to continue the Truth Social post from Donald Trump. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran, which I read to you, and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States of America as President and also representing the countries of the Middle East, it is an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. Thank you for your... He's not representing the countries. Whoever said Donald Trump was representing the countries of the Middle East? Whoever said that? He's not representing the countries of the Middle East. At least I don't think he is. And it is an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. This problem was already resolved. As I said, John Kerry had this deal in place in 2015. I played you the clip. I read some of the texts to you. And the thing with this base is they don't even recognize that. Lindsey Graham, who's been a member of the Senate for a long, long time and has been in the Senate during Obama, would know about the Iranian plan. The same Lindsey Graham who said that Donald Trump isn't fit to be in office office, that he's a vile and disgusting man, is suddenly now his number one supporter. Marco Rubio, who said Donald Trump is a horrible human being and shouldn't be anywhere near the Oval Office, is now the Secretary of State praising the man. So they're all two-faced people. You can't believe a word they say because they say one thing and then now they mean another thing. Now they say another, now they mean another thing, and they don't remember what they said 4 or 5 years ago. But if Lindsey Graham was a senator, he would know about the John Kerry deal. He would know if Marco Rubio was a senator too during Obama. And he would have known about the deal that John Kerry made because it was publicly announced. It was announced publicly, it was announced nationally, it was announced internationally, and the President of the United States addressed the nation, confirming it. So everybody would have known about this peace deal. And if they had been smart enough, and if they weren't so enamored with Donald Trump, they would have gone over to him and said, "Sir, we already have a peace deal with Iran in place. We've had it in place for a decade, and Iran has been complying with it, and we can prove it to you." But they don't have the balls to do it. They don't have the spine to do it. And that's the problem. Because if people like Marco Rubio, if people like Lindsey Graham had a spine, instead of they would go over to Donald Trump and said, "Mr. President, we have an Iranian deal that's been ongoing, and here is the deal." But instead they got to kiss his ass and allow them to rip it up. Allow them to rip it up. Because you don't just take a deal that wasn't easy to make, because you don't have to recognize the deal. I get that. But the other countries that are involved in making this deal, they've honored it. And that's one reason why they refuse to get involved in this. That's one way they refused. And Donald Trump is all talk. He's a bully. He intimidates. He thinks that by intimidating people and by threatening them and by bullying them, he's going to get stuff done. But it doesn't work that way because he's all talk. He's all talk. He said he was going to withdraw from NATO, and yet we're still in NATO. He said he was going to obliterate. He was never going to drop a bomb on Iran and commit genocide. He was never going to do it. Donald Trump is not a smart man, but he's not stupid. But he's not dumb enough to actually do it. He knows the consequences of that. He's just using it because he's using it as a bully tactic, because that's what narcissists do in order to get what they want. And believe me, I know this from personal experiences. Okay? And nobody ever gets what they want. The world doesn't work that way. It goes both ways. It's not a one-way street. It's not give me what I want or else. It's let's see what we can come up with. Even in a relationship, communication goes a long way. Without it, you got nothing. Relationships are based on compromising. And in a deal, nobody ever gets what they want. And you always have to make concessions in order to make it work. And you may not like it. You may not like it. But for all intents and purposes, this is the best deal we can come up with right now. Can we change it later? Absolutely. Can we renegotiate the terms of the deal? Absolutely. But for all intents and purposes, this is what we get now. And Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand that. We can't get everything we want. Should we have been in this war? Absolutely not. Would Congress have approved it if Donald Trump went? It depends what the reasoning was. What would be the reason why Donald Trump wants to go to war with Iran? And if Congress deems it's a good idea and it makes sense, then yeah, they would declare war on Iran. But the fact that they now, but the fact, and this war could have ended weeks ago if the Republicans would have accepted the wartime resolution that Democrats put forth in the House. But they didn't. And now they're demanding congressional approval. Something they already have. Something they already have. And they're asking for it. And just to prove a point that you can't trust this, the last line in The Guardian, Iran's Supreme National Security Council warned that our hands are on the trigger, and the moment the enemy makes the slightest mistake, it will be met with full force. Hesketh also had a similar choice of words. When he was asked how long the U.S. would remain in the region, he said, "We're not going anywhere," which is already a violation of the ceasefire, as I said. As I said, because part of the peace plan was withdraw your troops, and that's part of the ceasefire. And if there's a ceasefire, there's no reason to be there. But Prime Minister Starmer has said that the Iran war has ruined his relationship with Trump. And I'm not surprised, because how can you trust a madman who already violated international law, ripped up a treaty that already existed for the last decade that had been working? How can you trust that he's going to honor this new ceasefire or this new deal? Iran can't trust us anymore. Well, they never trusted us, but now they can never. Because Donald Trump says one thing and then does something else. Kerry Stemmer has stressed his values and their impact on his politics, while sidestepping a question about whether the Iran war has wrecked his relationship with Donald Trump. Responding to a question about Trump, he declined to criticize the U.S. president directly, but he implied that he thought Trump's decision to wage war on Iran was deeply flawed. Asked if his relationship with Trump was in tatters, Stammer told broadcasters, "I've acted as you would expect of a British Prime Minister, which is by being absolutely focused on what is our national interest, and that's why I've applied my principles and my values throughout. And my principles and values made sure that our decisions were that we wouldn't get involved in the action without a lawful basis, without a viable, thought-through plan. That was the right position for the United Kingdom, and of course that has included us taking action in collective self-defense. I act in the British national interest, but nothing is going to deflect me from that." And you have to respect the man that does that, who says, "That's right. Unless it's a legal reason for us to get involved in the war, why should I? Why should we? And I, as a prime minister, have to do what's best for my country and her people." And he's right. And he's right. And Donald Trump, when Carrie Stemmer said no to Trump about sharing the Air Force base or helping in the war, and he said no, Donald Trump got angry at them. Because Donald Trump doesn't understand diplomacy. He doesn't understand the law, or he doesn't give a shit about the law. And you have to respect Harry Stammer for sticking to his ground, no matter the pressure that Trump was giving him. That he stuck to his guns and did what a leader should do, which is put the people first. You know, something that Trump said in his campaign where he put America first, except he hasn't. So, and that's got to tell you the state of things now. Whoever thought that other countries would no longer believe in the United States? Whoever thought that they can't trust us anymore? Whoever thought that we'd start alienating each and every one of our friends? We've been here before with Trump's first term. And luckily, Trump cannot run again. But we have 3 years left of this nonsense. But this has nothing to do with Iran. This relationship already soured with Trump's Greenland takeover. Because when Stammer started with other European leaders in firmly opposing Trump's ambitions to annex Greenland, and over the past few weeks, Trump has frequently ridiculed and insulted Stammer in relation to the UK's failure to fully support the U.S. efforts. While other party leaders have been happy to condemn Trump publicly, Stammer has mostly not responded to the president's provocations beyond making a virtue of not being cowed by him. And that's what I just said. First of all, leaders don't mock each other, at least in public. A good leader understands when to strike and when not to. And I'm not just talking about one, I'm talking in general. My father once said, only pick the fights you know you're going to win. Okay? Nobody wins when you resort to childish tactics. And believe me, I know. But, and again, Trump has frequently retaliated for the UK's failure to fully support the U.S. war effort on Iran. Okay. But as Stammer said, on what legal basis would I have to go and involve our country in a war? Trump can't take no for an answer. He doesn't know what the word no means. In fact, narcissists don't know what the word no means. You tell a narcissist no, they will get angry and they will retaliate. Narcissists don't know what it means to apologize either. They'll just blame somebody else. Or they'll gaslight you and say it's your fault. And it's always your fault. Trust me on this, I speak from personal experience. Narcissists will never apologize. They will never admit they're wrong, because in their mind they think that what they're doing is correct. But they will throw other people under the bus, and they will blame you and say it's your fault, but then demand that you apologize to them for whatever crazy shit they've made up that you did. And people don't understand this. People really do not understand this. And that's why those who forget history are doomed to repeat, and we see that happening right now. We see that happening right before our eyes. The internet is a powerful tool, my fellow subscribers. The internet is a powerful tool. Anything can be found on there if you know where to look. And as I proved, there was an Iranian deal in place set forth by John Kerry, set forth by other world leaders, announced to the nation by President Obama, announced by Secretary of State John Kerry at the Geneva Conventions. And it was also announced by other world leaders as well. And that's another reason why Kerry Stammer would said no. Because he knew, while he wasn't Prime Minister back then, that deal exists. Whether or not you choose to admit it, whether or not Donald Trump rips up the deal or not, the internet is forever. Archives are forever. And you can't delete that unless you delete it from archives, unless you delete it from the public. It's there, as I've proven. And that itself was in violation of the law. Because that deal was a contract. You don't like the deal? It was the same thing back for the October 7th deal for the hostages. When President Joe Biden laid out the three-step plan for a ceasefire to return hostages for what happened on October 7th, Donald Trump took that deal and rewrote the deal because he didn't like it, because he didn't want Joe Biden getting the credit, because he's a petty, narcissistic, egotistical, unhinged maniac. And he needed the credit for it. Even though he had nothing to do with it, he wanted the credit. So he took the deal and renegotiated and redid it. And then said, I made a deal to get the hostages back. No, you didn't, you son of a bitch. Joe Biden made the deal. It was Joe Biden's deal. You just didn't like it because you don't have the credit for it. You could have done the same thing here, renegotiated the deal. But as President of the United States, you would know if they're complying with the deal because you are privy to that information. You get a threat matrix report every day. I'm sorry, you can't read, so forget that. But you are told every day what's going on in the world. And as the president, you would know that Iran is complying with the deal. You didn't like the deal because you hate Obama for whatever reason. You hate President Obama. And so because he got the credit for it, you can't accept it. So you want the deal. So we're going to go to war. We're going to kill people. We're going to waste taxpayers' dollars instead of putting the money into better use. We're going to put it into a war just so I can get what I want. Are you out of your fucking mind? And that's why MAGA doesn't like us, because they're intimidated by us, because we are smart, and we try to call them out. And they can do whatever they want, but at the end of the day, the internet is a very, very powerful tool. And the same people who are praising Donald Trump for this war, these people were around. They lived during Obama. All of these people, Mark Levin, Alex Jones, MAGA supporters, Lindsey Graham, they were all around during Obama. They know about this deal. The world knows about the deal. It's on YouTube. I played a clip. And the fact that you're saying we don't have a deal with Iran, well, then you're just gaslighting the American people, thinking we're stupid. And that's why they hate the libs. That's why they hate the liberals. That's why they hate the Democrats. Because we are the voice of reason, and they don't like that. They don't like that. And you can let them win. And this ceasefire is already in question. This ceasefire is already in question. I give it less than 2 weeks before the shit hits the fan once again. Because Donald Trump is a taco guy. Trump always chickens out. And he's going to wake up tomorrow and decide, you know what, I don't like the ceasefire deal. I want something else. And Iran can turn around to America and say, fuck you. This is what we agreed upon. And if you're going to go against our deal, this is going to be the second time you fucked us over. And so fuck you. We're going to pull the trigger and we're going to attack whoever we deem necessary. And that's what we have to be afraid of. We don't have to be afraid of Iran. Iran has the right to defend itself just like we have a right to defend ourselves. But when you renege on a deal, that has consequences. And the consequences may not always be the way you want it to be. But as I said, the deal may not always be the deal you want it to be. The deal may not always want to be the deal you want it to be. But a deal is a deal, whether you like it or not. Not everybody's always in, both sides can't always win. Just like in any relationship. And sometimes you got to do what you got to do to keep the other person happy, even if you don't like it. Sometimes you got to do things you don't like. And I've learned it the hard way. But at the end of the day, you could use it. You can use it to your advantage if you know how. I don't trust the United States government, but I do believe that it's time to invoke the 25th and impeach the motherfucker. Because if we don't, who knows what else? Because if we don't, who knows what he's capable of doing? Donald Trump is an unstable man. He's an unwell man. And he's delusional. And today it's Iran. He still has his sits on Cuba. But after that, who knows? I don't want to find out. Do you?